My name is Vivian M. Carver, and I'm 33 years old. I didn't even expect that this time they would be awaited with revenge. Not the subtle kind, not the quiet kind. This was going to be my kind of revenge, deliberate, patient, and timed so perfectly it would leave them completely exposed. For years, I played the role of the good daughter, the one who showed up early to help, stayed late to clean up, remembered birthdays, lent money I never saw again, and always put my parents before my own life. I did it so automatically that people started treating my effort like background noise, like the air, like something that would always be there. And every time, without fail, I'd watch as my younger brother Miles, the walking disaster, somehow ended up in the spotlight. Miles is, let's just say he's not exactly a pillar of responsibility. Two kids with a woman everyone knows is cheating on him. A history of job hopping that's more like job evaporation. A talent for finding the worst financial decisions at the worst possible times. Microloans, payday lenders, credit cards maxed out within weeks. You name it, he's done it. And yet, to my parents, he's a tragic hero. He just needs a little help right now, they'd say. Meanwhile, I was the one paying for repairs on their house, covering surprise bills, and doing the things Miles wouldn't even consider. I was the quiet safety net, the fixer, the one they could rely on without ever having to thank. My boyfriend, Graham Holt, has been the only person who ever said it out loud. They don't treat you like a daughter, he told me once, after I'd left dinner early to pick up my dad from a mechanic because Miles forgot. They treat you like a solution. I laughed at the time, like it was an exaggeration, because laughing was easier than admitting how true it felt. Then my parents' 40th wedding anniversary came around, and I thought, this is my chance to give them something special. I wanted them to feel celebrated, respected, surrounded by people who cared. I booked a beautiful ballroom in the city, the kind with polished hardwood floors and chandeliers that actually sparkle. I hired a string quartet for cocktail hour. I found a caterer with a menu that could make anyone forget their diet and an open bar stocked with my dad's favorite whiskey. I ordered a 3-tier cake from a bakery that's booked months out. The total was $8,100. Every cent came from me. Graham and I agreed we'd cut back this year. No big vacation, fewer little luxuries, because I wanted that night to be perfect for my parents. It sounds pathetic when I say it now, but in my head, I was still that little girl trying to prove she was worth being proud of. Trying to earn love the way I'd been trained to, through usefulness. A week before the anniversary, Miles called. The second I saw his name, my stomach tightened. He never calls unless there's drama. And he didn't waste time. We need to keep this for close family only, he said. I blinked. What do you mean? His voice had that tone he uses when he thinks he's being reasonable, like you're the one who's about to overreact. Too many people makes it complicated, he said. Just keep it tight. Us, the kids, mom and dad. That's it. No lifelong friends, no cousins, no neighbors who'd been around since we were kids, no one who actually knew my parents outside the stories they told about themselves. Just a little bubble. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. 4 words. Don't make a fuss. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not like a dramatic snap, more like a lock clicking into place. Quiet. Final. I thought about every time they brushed me aside for Miles, every time they excused his mess while expecting me to quietly handle mine, every time they'd looked at me like I was being difficult for wanting basic respect. And I realized this anniversary was the perfect chance to flip the script. So I didn't argue. I didn't explain what it would cost to cancel. I didn't mention the cake was paid for, the caterer had ordered special ingredients, the quartet had cleared their schedule, the ballroom deposit was non-refundable. I simply said, okay. Then I called every vendor one by one. The ballroom, canceled. The caterer, gone. The musicians, canceled. The flowers, canceled. The cake, canceled. The open bar, gone. All of it. I didn't replace it with anything else. There would be no grand celebration, just close family only. Exactly what Miles wanted. Exactly what my mom endorsed. And I didn't tell them, because I wanted them to find out in real time, when it was too late to fix. Graham watched me make the calls from across the kitchen, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When I finished the last cancellation, he didn't lecture me. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said quietly, "They're going to blame you." "I know," I replied, "and you're okay with that." I looked down at my phone, at the vendor confirmation emails flooding in, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. For once, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just done. The morning of their anniversary, I woke up feeling strangely calm. No panic, no checklist, no rushing around to make sure the centerpieces arrived on time or that the quartet knew where to park. There was nothing to manage, nothing to fix. I'd already burned it all down a week earlier. What I felt instead was anticipation, like standing behind a curtain, waiting for the first domino to fall in a line you've been setting up your whole life. I made coffee, fed our dog, sat at the kitchen table while Graham flipped through his phone like it was any other day. He didn't ask how I felt about what was coming. He already knew. He'd watched me for years give more than I could afford, money, time, effort, while my parents funneled their praise and patience to Miles, like he was the only child they were emotionally invested in. At 9:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring out. 5 minutes later. Dad? Same treatment. Then Miles. I watched it all light up and go dark like little sparks hitting water. The voicemails started coming in. At first, they were light. Mom wondering if I was already at the ballroom. Dad asking if I needed him to bring anything. Miles asking what time the limo was picking us up. They were still under the impression that music, drinks, speeches, and a sparkling room full of witnesses were waiting for them. By 10:30, the messages shifted. Mom. The bakery isn't answering. Dad. The venue's main line said our booking was released. Miles. Why are cousins saying they didn't get invites? Is there a mistake? I didn't respond. I kept drinking my coffee, watching the sunlight crawl across the floor like time was slow on purpose. At 11:45, Dad's voicemails turned sharp. Where are you? The caterer says they have no order. The quartet says they were told not to come. What is going on? By noon, it was ridiculous. 41 voicemails, 27 missed calls, texts from all three of them coming in like machine gun fire. Graham glanced at my phone once and then back at me. You still okay? I nodded. Better than okay. At 1 p.m., Dad called again. This time I answered. Before I could even say hello, his voice exploded through the speaker. Why was the ballroom canceled? Why is the open bar gone? Why is the florist saying the order was withdrawn? Vivian, what did you do? I didn't soften my tone. I didn't offer soothing. I didn't pretend. You told me close family only, I said flatly. That's exactly what you're getting. There was a pause so long I could almost hear him trying to process it. Then he started in on how this was supposed to be once in a lifetime, how I'd embarrass them, how people would ask questions, how I'd ruined their big day. I stared out the window at our quiet street and felt something settle deeper in me. You made it clear what you wanted, I said, and I did exactly what you asked. Nothing more, nothing less. He sputtered something about me being ungrateful and hung up. I barely had time to set my phone down before I saw their car turning onto our street like a storm cloud with headlights. They didn't arrive like people coming to talk. They arrived like people coming to collect a debt. The tires crunched to a stop. Doors flew open. My dad was already pointing at the porch like he was directing a raid. My mom had her phone in her hand like she'd been mid-text trashing me to someone. Miles stepped out wearing that smug little expression he always wears when he thinks the room is already on his side. Mom didn't knock. She slammed her fist on the door 3 times, each one sharper than the last. When I opened it, the heat from outside came in with them, hot air and hotter anger. Mom launched immediately. How could you humiliate us like this? What were we supposed to tell people? Do you have any idea how disgusting this is? Dad's voice came right behind hers, loud and heavy. This isn't about you. This is about family. Miles stood slightly behind them, arms folded, smirk in place. He let them do the shouting, like guards punishing a servant while the prince watched. I didn't step aside to let them in. I didn't invite them to sit. I didn't play host. You got exactly what you asked for, I said calmly. Close family only. That was never meant literally, my mom snapped. It was understood, Dad insisted. You were still supposed to make it special. Miles finally spoke, dropping his smug little gem like a verdict. A real daughter would have found a way to make it work. That one made me laugh. A sharp, unplanned laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane coming from him. The man who'd watched me cover repairs, cover bills, cover their emergencies while he created new disasters and called it life. And then Graham stepped into the doorway beside me. He'd been listening the whole time, silent, watching. But something in Miles's comment flipped a switch. Graham didn't yell. He didn't swear. He spoke like a judge reading a sentence. You want to talk about real, he said, eyes locked on my parents. Real is watching Vivian sacrifice year after year while you praise Miles for doing nothing. Real is watching her show up for you while you treat her like a tool. Real is watching you ignore her life and then demand she throw you a ballroom party to prove she loves you. My mom's face tightened. Dad opened his mouth to interrupt. Graham kept going. You've taken her money, her time, her peace, and you've never once acted like it mattered. You're not angry because she ruined an anniversary. You're angry because for the first time, she didn't clean up your mess. Miles' smirk faltered. For a moment, all three of them stood there in complete silence. Then Graham finished with the simplest sentence in the world. You can leave now. He didn't step aside. He didn't negotiate. He just stood there, shoulder to shoulder with me, and waited. My parents turned around and walked back to the car. The sound of the door closing behind them felt like the cleanest breath I'd taken in years. I thought the chaos would end there. I was wrong. By the next morning, I expected silence. That's usually how these things go in my family. Big explosion, dramatic exit, then days or weeks of icy quiet where everyone pretends nothing happened while privately deciding how to spin it. I figured they'd retreat, lick their wounds, and regroup. At 10:15 a.m., I heard tires crunch on the gravel outside. My stomach tightened. I peeked through the front window and saw my parents' car parked at the curb again. But this time, something was off. Miles wasn't with them. That alone made my pulse jump. In our family, whenever there was conflict involving me, Miles was always attached to my parents like legal counsel. He made sure their version of events was clear, which usually meant I was framed as difficult, emotional, or ungrateful. Today it was just my parents. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. My mom started talking immediately, fast and rehearsed, like she was afraid I'd shut the door if she paused too long. We've been thinking about things, she said. We just want you to understand our side. My dad stood beside her, hands shoved into his pockets, nodding along like a man waiting for his cue in a courtroom. The story went like this. Miles wasn't doing well, not just a rough patch. Not well. Money stress. Anxiety. Some loans they didn't want to explain in detail. That, according to them, was the real reason the anniversary had to be small. They didn't want people asking questions if Miles looked stressed or if he didn't bring a gift. Then my mom pivoted smoothly into sentiment. But even with all that, she said, it still would have been nice to see everyone together. Family matters. I almost laughed. If family mattered to them, they wouldn't have spent the last 20 years showing me exactly where I ranked. Before I could respond, my dad's eyes drifted past me, narrowing. Whose car is that? He asked. I followed his gaze. 3 houses down, a dark sedan sat angled just enough to see my front door. The engine was running. The driver wore sunglasses, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. I recognized the car immediately. Kendra Shaw, Miles's girlfriend. She looked up for half a second, then back to her phone. In that instant, everything clicked. She wasn't lost. She wasn't waiting for someone. She was watching. Whether Miles wanted video, updates, or just confirmation of what was said, I didn't know. But I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't over. I turned back to my parents. Miles sent her, I said flatly. My mom flinched. My dad's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous, my mom said too quickly. Then tell her to leave, I replied. Silence. They didn't. I crossed my arms. Mark's debt isn't my responsibility. If it's such a burden on you, I'll pay it directly, every cent of it. But I'm not spending one more dollar pretending our family is perfect. The reaction was immediate. Oh, no, my mom said. We've got it under control. This isn't about money. Then why are you here? I asked. Dad cut in. It's about meaning, about showing people we're still strong. There it was. Image, reputation, audience. I'm done funding illusions, I said quietly. Conversation's over. They turned to leave. As they walked down the steps, my dad paused and glanced back once more at Kendra's car. She immediately put the phone down and started the engine, pulling away like she'd been caught somewhere she didn't belong. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. 2 days later, my cousin Elise called. She never inserts herself into family drama, ever. She skipped Thanksgiving once just to avoid being in the same room as Miles. Her voice was tight. Vivian, she said, you need to know what Miles is saying about you. According to her, Miles had gone on a full narrative campaign. In his version, I'd stolen my parents' money for the anniversary. I'd canceled everything at the last minute out of jealousy. I'd humiliated them on purpose because I'd never been able to stand being in his shadow. That last part almost made me laugh. There had never been a spotlight for me to share. But while Miles was busy painting me as the villain, reality started tearing his image apart faster than I ever could. It began with the debt. The private loan my parents refused to explain wasn't from a bank. It wasn't even from a sketchy online lender. It was from a man who dealt in cash and intimidation. And when Miles missed payments, that man didn't send emails. He showed up, broad daylight, my parents' front door, pounding hard enough to rattle windows, shouting about money owed so loudly neighbors came outside. Someone across the street pulled out a phone. Another neighbor called the cops. By the time police arrived, the man was gone, but not before making it very clear he'd be back. By that evening, the neighborhood knew. The same people who'd always praised my parents as respectable suddenly had a new topic. Then the second hit landed. Kendra, the same woman who'd been parked outside my house, was caught cheating. Not rumor, not suspicion. Caught in a car in a parking lot by one of my parents' oldest friends. That friend told someone else, that someone else told everyone. Within 48 hours, the story had spread through extended family, neighbors, and even my dad's country club circle. Years of image management collapsed in a weekend, and I didn't have to lift a finger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up after Miles. I was watching the mess finally reach the people who'd protected him. And I knew, deep down, that my parents would be back. Not to apologize. To ask me to fix it. They came back exactly when I knew they would. Not angry this time, not loud. Careful. 2 days after Elisa's call, my parents' car rolled up to the curb again. Slow and deliberate. Like they were approaching a negotiation table instead of my front porch. They didn't pull into the driveway. They parked on the street with the engine still running, as if they already knew there was a chance they'd be leaving quickly. I opened the door and stayed where I was. My mom smiled first. The kind of smile you use when you need something from someone you've wronged but don't want to admit it yet. My dad stood half a step behind her, shoulders slumped, hands clasped together like he was trying to look smaller. "We've had a rough couple of days," my mom began softly. I nodded once. I know. She took that as encouragement and kept going. "Things with Miles have been stressful," she said. "The money issues, the gossip, people talking when they don't know the whole story." "People usually talk when something's been hidden too long," I replied. My dad cleared his throat. "We're just asking for a little support," he said, "until things settle down." Support. The word sat between us, heavy and familiar. "Support how?" I asked. They exchanged a look, a practiced one. "Well," my mom said carefully, "just helping us get through this season. Covering some things, helping us manage." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "How much?" I asked. They hesitated. That told me everything. "It's not about a number," my dad said quickly. "It's about family sticking together." I smiled, not a warm one, a knowing one. "Then let's talk numbers," I said. They froze. I continued calmly. "I'll pay every cent of Miles's debt, directly, to the people he owes. I won't give him cash. I won't give you cash. I'll clear it so it's done." My mom's eyes widened. My dad's face flickered with relief for half a second before something else replaced it. "But," my mom started. "No," I said, "that's the offer." Dad shifted. "That's generous, but that won't fix everything." "There it is," I said quietly. "What you actually want fixed isn't the debt." My mom sighed. "We just need things to look normal again." And there it was. Not peace, not accountability, normal. "You want me to pay so people stop talking," I said, "so you can go back to dinners and events and pretend nothing's wrong." "That's not fair," my dad snapped. "It's accurate," I replied. Their tone changed then. The softness dropped. "This family has always taken care of each other," my dad said coldly. "And if you can't be part of that when we need you, maybe you shouldn't be part of it at all." I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. For years, I'd been afraid of that sentence. Now it felt like permission. "I agree," I said simply. My mom stared at me like she'd misheard. I repeated, "I agree." There was nothing left to say after that. They turned and walked back to the car. My mom shut the door harder than she needed to. The engine revved, and they drove off without looking back. By that evening, the story had already started spreading. My parents told people they'd cut ties with me, that I'd chosen money over family, that I'd humiliated them on purpose. Miles added his own flavor. Apparently his kids wouldn't be around mine anymore. That part hurt. My son loved his cousins. When he asked why they weren't coming over, I knelt in front of him and said, "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that aren't fair." He nodded like he understood more than I wanted him to. The next few weeks were quiet, uneasy, but quiet. Then Elise called again. "Vivian," she said, barely containing herself, "you're going to want to hear this." It turned out the man Miles owed money to wasn't the only one. When Miles couldn't pay him back in full, the lender started tracking down other debts Miles had accumulated. One of those debts belonged to my dad's oldest golf buddy, Harold Dane. Harold isn't subtle. At the country club where my parents had spent years curating their image, Harold decided to tell the story loudly. In the lounge, in front of people my parents desperately wanted to stay in good standing with. By the time my parents walked in for their usual dinner, everyone already knew. According to Elise, they didn't even finish their meal. They just left. Within days, invitations stopped coming. Charity events dried up. My mom's friends avoided eye contact. Years of appearances collapsed in a matter of weeks. And then, one evening, someone knocked on my door. Miles, alone. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. No girlfriend, no parents, no confidence. He didn't apologize. He didn't mention the anniversary. He just said, "Can you talk to Mom and Dad for me? They're not answering my calls." I shook my head. "I can't help you." He stood there for a moment like he was deciding whether to beg or get angry. Then he left. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "You've made your point. Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen for a long time before setting my phone down. Yes, for the first time in my life, I was. 3 weeks passed after that message. No calls, no surprise visits, no dramatic posts on social media, just silence. At first, the quiet felt unnatural, like the calm after a storm when you're still bracing for another hit. I kept expecting something, another guilt-soaked voicemail, a relative trying to mediate, Miles showing up again with a new angle. None of it came. And slowly I realized something unsettling. Without them, my life felt lighter. Not happier in a fireworks way, not triumphant, just lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight for so long that my body had forgotten what standing straight felt like. Graham noticed it before I did. "You're sleeping better," he said one morning as we drank coffee on the porch. "You don't jump when your phone buzzes anymore." I hadn't realized how tightly wound I'd been until then. We talked about the fallout sometimes, but not obsessively. We didn't need to dissect it anymore. The truth had already surfaced, burned clean by exposure. Through Elise, I heard fragments. My parents were still living in that small apartment. My dad's disability checks barely covered rent and utilities. My mom had started working extra hours where she could. Miles had lost his car when the lender finally took it. His kids were staying with their mother more often now. Kendra was gone for good. The golden circle had shrunk to just the three of them. And for the first time, there was no one left to blame but themselves. I ran into my parents once at the grocery store. It wasn't dramatic. They stood a few aisles away, pretending to be deeply interested in canned soup. When our eyes met, my mom smiled politely. My dad nodded, stiff and careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. They didn't approach me. They didn't accuse me. They didn't ask for anything. That told me everything. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the absence of demand. Later that week, I got a message from a mutual friend asking how I was holding up after everything. I thought about it before answering. "I'm good," I typed. "Actually good." And I meant it. I stopped volunteering explanations for my absence at family events. I stopped softening the story to make it more palatable for people who were uncomfortable with consequences. If someone asked, I told the truth, calmly, without venom. I set a boundary. They didn't like it. That was enough. My son adjusted faster than I expected. Kids have a way of accepting reality when it's presented honestly. He missed his cousins, but he didn't miss the tension. Our house felt calmer. Laughter came easier. One night, as I tucked him in, he asked, "Are we in trouble with Grandma and Grandpa?" I kissed his forehead. "No," I said. "Sometimes adults make choices that mean they can't be in our lives the way they should be. That's not your fault." He nodded and rolled over satisfied. That's when it hit me. Breaking cycles doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks quiet. It looks like choosing not to explain yourself to people who only hear what benefits them. It looks like refusing to clean up messes you didn't make. It looks like letting the golden child finally live without a spotlight and seeing what happens when the lights go out. I didn't win. They didn't lose. Reality just arrived. And for once, I wasn't the one holding the broom while everyone else made the mess. That's not revenge. That's freedom.